All right, good morning, everybody. We're live. I am here at the Birdhouse, and today we're being joined by the founder of the Finch Research Network, Matt Young. So we're really excited to have him here today. He brings with him a whole bunch of experience on finches. He's got 15 years of experience at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and he knows his stuff about finches and the winter finch forecast. So I'm excited to have him here today. If you have any questions, you can throw those in the comments. If you've seen any evening grosbeaks right now on the camera, we've got a camera he suggested. We pull up to see some live, some of these birds live, like the evening grosbeaks. If you've seen any evening grosbeaks or pine grosbeaks or any kind of interesting things, you can throw those in the comments. But I will hand it over to Matt. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people about what I love more than anything, probably, is finches. As Liz mentioned, this is actually a Finch Research Network YouTube channel feeder cam in Maine, northern Maine. It's literally just a few miles from New Brunswick. There's a lot of mourning doves right now, but there's also a lot of evening grosbeaks there. There's been upwards of 70 to 100 most days, a few pine grosbeaks, a few siskins, and a few goldfinches joining in the finch fun too. So anyway, I'd love it if people check it out. We only went live with this a couple weeks ago. I'm a big believer, and I'll get to this a little bit, that there's a lot of wellness in just watching nature, whether that's engaging with it outdoors or whether that's actually, at home, just, kind of watching feeders in your backyard or watching feeder cams. I think it's adds a tremendous amount of just enjoyment to people's lives. So anyway, but we can go to the slides now that I had. So about 2.5. This actually goes back a few. I've been studying finches and interested in finches for a good 25 years now. It started actually when I was in Yellowstone. I mean, I think I mentioned this in most of my presentations that I give out there to various clubs and groups. I did in my undergraduate degree in hydrogeology, meteorology, and I realized I didn't want to go into that. And this was 1995, and I bought a pair of binoculars, bought a car, went to a Grateful Dead concert, and then got up the next day and drove across country to Yellowstone. It took a few days to get out there, of course, about a week. And while I was the first day I was in Yellowstone, I grabbed my binoculars, went to Lower Falls, and a flock of crossbills flew in above me and started feeding. And my whole worldview kind of shifted. And I didn't know it at the time, changed my life. I mean, I didn't know that I would then go on to do 15 years at the lab and kind of be the one that call types these recordings of red crossbills. So, about 7 years ago, a few of us started kind of bounce around the idea of starting a Finch Research Network. And I've been always involved to some degree with the Finch forecast that goes back to the 90s. Ron Pittaway in Ontario is the one that started that. And now Tyler Orr. Sorry about that. Tyler Orr is the new Finch forecaster, and he's on the board of directors of this nonprofit, the Finch Research Network. And this is what we launched 2.5 years ago. Well, it was September 2020 we launched it with the Finch forecast. And so a bunch of us came together, decided to do this. I went through all the paperwork and the legal work, and it's been we could not have predicted launching this thing in a better year than we did 2 years ago when there was a super flight. All of the finches were around in pretty good numbers that year, 2 years ago. Now this year is a little bit different. It's again a very solid finch winter. You might have to do a little bit of tracking eBird and finding where the hot spots are, but there's finches to be found in much of scattered throughout much of New York, including near the Rochester area. So where are we going with kind of the Finch Research Network? And again, anybody has any questions, by all means, jump in. I like to keep things as interactive as possible. But really, there's kind of four things, we would like to focus on. As wellness is getting students. We want to fund student projects getting people outdoors into the field. And some of these projects kind of overlap. They kind of touch upon all these topics: wellness, conservation, education, and science. So the winter finch forecast 2020 is a great area where it kind of touches upon everything. If you think about it, this goes back officially. Ron Pitaway started this in online in 1999. Now it preceded that. A lot of people don't realize that. In the Ontario birding circles, he was doing this at least back in the early 90s. So this has existed for 30 years, this winter finch forecast. And I did the first winter finch eruptive bird survey for the Lab of O in 1999 as well. Now that only lasted a couple years. Then eBird became kind of the main platform for kind of tracking bird populations. So origins, 1999, Ron Pitaway started this thing officially online. Format evolved over a few years. And the format basically that you see now that we put out every September, late September, has been around for about 20 years. We actually dedicate the Finch Research Network to basically Ron Pitaway and Ian Newton in the UK. I mean, quite frankly, the Finch Research Network wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for Ron. He kind of started, the enthusiasm around finches. Finches have had this kind of mystique for many years. And, a lot of people, I can't tell you, Liz, how many people over the years have said, they look forward to the forecast. It's one of the more highly anticipated birding ornithological articles of the year to come out. And, it can kind of really make or break a winter in some ways for birding here in central New York. It's, if you got a flock of finches coming to your yard, it kind of can brighten up a long winter. And if you have a flock of red poles or grosbeaks or even purple finches, it really could go a long, long way. So, the forecast is mainly about these northern birds, these northern finches that come down every so often out of the boreal forest. And that's a picture of the boreal forest right there. And the populations kind of go up and down. They kind of boom bust a bit, depending on, reproductive success, which is tied to food sources. And it's a little hard to see here. I don't know. Hopefully people can see this. We need to make this a little bit more. Those dots on that map are the number of people we have that actually do the survey every year. So it goes from coast to coast across the northern tier states, and from one coast of Canada to the west coast to east coast. So we have almost 100 people now where Tyler will send out a survey on various species of foods that finches feed on for the wintertime. And they'll ask them to rank the crop. Like, is it poor? Is it a moderate crop this year? Is it an excellent crop? So on and so forth. And that gives us insight to how or what we think the forecast will be, or the finch eruptions will be over the following months. Now
So
we
is it
want
like pine cones, like the seed, like the pine cone crop and that kind of.
Yeah, spruce crops, pine crops, fruit crops for like pine grosbeaks, Bohemian waxwings. Red poles really, really track alder and birch catkin crops. So that's another thing that we're looking at. So when we send a survey out, we literally ask for input on, the conifer seed crop for, crossbills and siskins. We ask for the birch crop and the alder crop for the red poles. We'll ask for what's the fruit mountain ash crop look like in the boreal this year for pine grosbeaks or Bohemian waxwings, which is an honorary finch. And also maples and various ashes that evening grosbeaks and purple finches really, really love to feed on. So we want to expand this. And in fact, we're kind of excited about this. It's a little hard to read this. So we have an iNaturalist project that we're actually testing right now. So iNaturalist, for people not familiar with it, is kind of like eBird, but it's for basically inputting data or information about any kind of taxa, whether it's trees or birds or moths or butterflies or what have you, or flowers. And so we are in the beginning stages of testing out a Finch forecast assessment where we want this to be kind of an educational, conservation driven project around um, people getting involved and being able to actually become part of the Finch forecasting network. So it's as simple as, so we have this now, and anybody can look this up if you do a type ahead, Finch forecast food assessment. So the basic gist is if you walk up to a conifer tree or a box elder or a crab apple, you can take a photo of the tree and see what kind of crop is on it. And then you can upload that photo. And there's drop downs in this. And I don't go into, great detail. There are drop downs where it then asks you, is this a poor crop? Is it a medium crop? Is it a great crop? Is it an excellent crop kind of thing? And if you see a finch feeding on it, you can also add that data in, and you can also put some notes in as well. So we're beta testing this now. We're working out the kinks. We're trying to get some methods in place. We will be launching this come June. So believe it or not, it's food crops develop in the summertime. So it's the perfect time to get people outdoors and to kind of like do the assessment on this, to put input. And the more we build the network, the more, accurate the forecast, or the better we'll be able to predict the forecast. If we have more data from across a lot of different points, and of course, we're kind of looking for data from the northern tier states northward, obviously. But I mean, we do have people that report in Pennsylvania, which is, still kind of a northern tier state as well. So again, a big part of what we want to kind of push, and one of the things I just did a talk for the Wild Bird Feeding Institute in Florida a couple weeks ago, and I mean, what other group of birds probably is the most common group of birds, both in individuals and in diversity, than finches at feeders? I mean, it's even if you look at the kind of the backyard ones that most of us see from day to day, which are house finches and goldfinches, because of the sociality of finches, which I think actually we could kind of learn a lot from observing birds. We often get, at times 20, 30, 40, 50, goldfinches or house finches. Now, they're around all year long. These other finches, the two grosbeaks, the two red polls, the crossbills aren't a huge kind of feeder bird, but certainly purple finches and the two grosbeaks and the two red polls and pine siskins are absolutely they're big drivers of, like, what we see at our back window. So I always have to make a plug. I never had this. In fact, I just saw it a second ago as I'm looking out the window here at the feeders. I have a full breeding plumage goldfinch at my feeder right now, which I've never seen in December. So a lot of people out there, I've gotten this question many times, and maybe you have too, Liz, like, where'd all my goldfinches go? Have you ever gotten
that all the time? Yep, exactly. When do they migrate back into the area is like the big question. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So they don't, it's the one finch that's kind of like, it's like Superman. They kind of change their look from winter to summer. And it's really the only finch that has a drastic change in plumage from the summer to the winter time. I mean, they're basically, the males get kind of a yellowish, kind of a dull yellowish look. The females are almost more of an olive color in some ways in the wintertime. And then they change into this breeding plumage of this slide here on the right. They do that in, I think it's like June. They usually do that, May, June. So I've never, in all my years of my finch fanaticism, I've never seen a full breeding plumage goldfinch in the middle of a winter, and we got about 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground down here. I'm actually just outside Cortland, New York, so maybe I don't know. What's it about an hour and a half, hour and
Yeah.
45 minutes from you?
Hmm.
So yeah, the interesting thing is I've never seen that, and it's really makes for quite the nice photograph in the wintertime with the snow backdrop. So again, as far as a lot of nature watching, a lot of it starts right outside your own window. That's a photo I took last year on one of my trips. I went out to Chicago. I had to do a trip out in that area, and I took this photo out there of a goldfinch. So that's a winter plumage goldfinch there on the left, a male probably, and that's a red poll on the right looking away. So again, I cannot, you know, you know, press upon people just the benefits I think of watching birds. But I'm speaking to the choir probably here to some degree. Now, one thing, all right. So I was going to move this slide. A lot of you might not know I'm working on a new Stokes guide with Lillian Stokes. I don't know if people. I'm assuming there's a few people out there that know the Stokes guides. They've done 35 guides over 36 years, and so this book actually will be due out now in spring of 2024. So I got to update that slide, but we're working on them right now. We have a manuscript deadline in March. We'll be covering the 17 finches that are in North America, but we'll also be covering vagrants. There's 8 or 9 vagrant species we're
Hmm.
covering in this book, and there's also honey creepers, which are the Hawaii finches of in Hawaii that are in great danger of going extinct. Actually, did you have a question? No.
Um, I have some questions. Yeah. Are you still, do you have more slides?
Yeah, I have a couple more
Yeah.
slides. I
I can
just
wait
want to
till then.
wrap this up because we only have about 10 more minutes here. So, one of the big projects we're working on right now, the Finch Research Network, from a science and conservation perspective, is this evening grosbeak project. There was a Partners in Flight report about 5 6 years ago that came out that described evening grosbeak as one of the species, in great danger. 92% decline over 50 years. A lot of us can remember either times ourselves or our parents or people we've talked to over the years saying that, these birds would be so common back in the 70s and 80s and they would take over a feeder. In fact, they got the nickname grocery beaks because they have voracious appetites for sunflower seed.
Hmm.
But they've crashed. The population's kind of way down, and we are literally now studying these birds. It's part of an international working group that I'm co-leading with a bunch of scientists and a bunch of conservationists and even just landowners across North America. We're putting tags on birds, trying to get an idea of where these birds are moving to and what are they doing between seasons, and is there something that we're missing here?
Yeah.
So, we're really looking for, we're fundraising around this project, but it's a project that is it's a dream come true, really, for me. I've been an evening grosbeak fan for a long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, that seems to be the question people always have when we talk about the declines of whether it be, grassland birds or evening grosbeaks or red-headed woodpecker. Everybody wants to know, why, and what can I do? Is there anything that's jumping out? Is it habitat loss? Could it be pesticide use, or, could it be a mix of a whole bunch of different things that we just don't know?
I think these problems, in a lot of ways, are mixes of things. There's
Yeah.
not usually just one. Although pesticide use is certainly not for evening grosbeaks per se, but for the insectivorous species. I mean, I've just seen just a very, very kind of alarming decline in some of the swallow species over the last few years, and I just scratch my head and go, where the heck are all these barn swallows that, you drive roads in New York and you just see them tree swallows zipping across the road. They just don't seem to be nearly abundant. Now, with evening grosbeaks, it's a little bit of a different dynamic. There's certainly some change in habitat that's going on, but they tend to be a spruce budworm bird, which, a lot of people out there might have heard, like the budworm warblers, Tennessee warbler, bay-breasted warbler, Cape May warblers. So budworm is basically a caterpillar that defoliates fir and spruce in the boreal forest, and it's a native species, and it tends to go through cyclical natures of boom bust.
Mhm.
And these budworm birds, when there's a bust period, the populations seem to follow those, the cyclical nature of this budworm. Now, there were 3 big outbreaks in the 1900s, and the last one, up until this recent one that has now started over the last 5 to 10 years, there was one that went from 1965 to 1985, and that's when grosbeaks were probably at a high level naturally, maybe even higher levels than even historical, because of this kind of budworm dynamic. Now, in the last 20 something years, the budworm is being managed now because it defoliates trees and can kill trees. And the timber industry is a big part of the economy in Canada. So there's a lot of dynamics to this. So it's habitat change. It could be, they also are one of the species in North America that actually, I just talked to somebody the other day that's studying collisions, believe it or not. We think of like bird collisions with buildings and stuff and towers as neotropical event, but apparently grosbeaks, evening grosbeaks, are in the top 3 of mortality from collisions. So that's another thing that we're looking at. Also, disease in population. We know that a couple of years ago, siskins were everywhere, it seems, and there was a salmonella outbreak, and we've seen that over the years in siskins and redpolls, conjunctivitis in house finches. Conjunctivitis has also been known in evening grosbeaks. We saw some when we were in Maine, putting some tags on birds in this slide here, that I have some text in there of how many birds we actually banded in Maine and put tags on. So it's a multi-tiered issue. It often is. Certainly for some species, it can be more one topic, but this one seems like it's a few different issues going on, but probably the budworm thing is the biggest one. So, again, Fern is a nonprofit. We started this thing a couple of years ago. FinchNetwork.org is our website. I'm always excited to talk to people about finches. We do appreciate the support. We have a couple different apparel lines, although we're almost out of our shirts that we sell. But Bird Collective, which are these two great women that started a company in the city that also puts out a line of finch wear. But we appreciate any support we can get out there, because we are funding student projects. We're still funding an evening grosbeak project going to start soon, and I'm sitting in on a meeting with the Maui and Kauai recovery team on Thursday about trying to do what we can to collaborate to help the honey creepers, which is only 17 species left. Four of them right now sit on the brink of endanger or of extinction. So anyway, I'll shut up now.
Is that where the honey creepers are? The honey creepers South America, or are those Hawaii? Where are those
No,
from?
so they're kind of an interesting name. So the honey creepers in Hawaii are true fringillid finches, closely related to our finches that we see here in the States. A couple of years ago, ABA included Hawaii as part of the region, the American Birding Association. So we're adding it in there, and I don't know how you have a network, a Finch Research Network that's conservation driven, and you don't put some energy towards the honey creeper issue over there. The thought is 5 million years ago, a flock of Eurasian rose finches, which are a very close relative to house finches and purple finches, wandered in an eruptive event or some weather event, blew them off course. They landed on Hawaii, and they adaptively radiated to 50 something species 5 million years ago. And a lot of them have actually they adapted to the point where they develop these bills that don't even look all that finch like, some of them. So it's a fascinating fact. Look, if Darwin landed on Hawaii, we'd be talking about Hawaii's finches, not Darwin's tanagers, which
Hmm.
they're now classified as tanagers. The
Okay.
Galapagos, the Galapagos finches are actually known as tanagers now. So anyway,
Oh.
any questions out there?
Yeah, it looks like Ed has a question here. He says, we have a small flock, maybe 15 to 25, of goldfinches that visit our feeders this year around the Rochester, New York area, but they tend to disappear midsummer for weeks at a time. Could they be erupting to another region? Any idea where they go? We get this question all the time. People have finches like crazy, and then all of a sudden they disappear. Do you have any input on that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about goldfinches is they are one of the last breeders of the breeding season. So in about July, they start to break up into smaller groups, and they're breeding. Like a lot of these finches, they're tied to specific food crops, as I mentioned with the assessment. Um, Goldfinches use thistle, wild thistle, as the layering of the lining of the nest, and also the seeds to feed on and to feed the young. So in mid July, they basically break up into smaller groups and they go nest. And when the birds are nesting, they're not going to be visiting the feeders as regularly, because that main food source becomes available right around July. So I suspect that's what you're seeing there is you have flocks of them, and then all of a sudden they disappear. You got to remember, in the summertime, there's a lot more wild food too in general. So the birds will kind of disperse a bit more. And because finches are so social, they can they'll disperse. They disperse kind of from these bigger flocks into smaller groups to go nest. So
And goldfinches are kind of unique too, in a way, right? Where they eat almost exclusively just seeds, where other birds will kind of vary their diet
that's
based on the time of the
basically, yeah, that's one of the whole, like, what people ask, well, what is a finch? Well, that used to be a pretty straightforward question when we would kind of taxonomically group these birds based on morphology, but genetics are kind of mixing these things up more now. But what used to define a finch was, kind of a thick bill used for cracking seed. That was
year.
kind of the basic commoner's term or definition of a finch. So, that bill is used for feeding on seed, and finches are primarily seed eaters. They're not big insects now. Now, with a budworm outbreak, birds in general, I don't care what bird it is, are somewhat opportunistic. So if there's a really slow, abundant, protein-rich food source that a bird has availability to in the middle of the breeding season, they're going to utilize that food source. But for the most part, yes, finches are carnivorous. They feed on seeds, but they will opportunistically feed on insects as well.
Great. And then just to wrap it up, do you have any, as we go into the winter months and people hope to attract some of these birds to their backyards, do you have any suggestions on feeders or types of seeds that you've found that work well to attract a diversity of these finches?
Yeah, 100%. So, black oil sunflower seed is kind of the universal seed. Although I will say, these kind of more premium blends that have come out over the last 5-10 years that are very targeted for certain groups of birds. Particularly, some of them are like a finch mix.
Hmm.
Are very, very good to feed birds. Now, grosbeaks, evening grosbeaks, they're bigger. They're a little bit more clumsy compared to other finches as well, because we're seeing the best grosbeak flights we've seen since the 80s now. They like larger platform feeders or hopper feeders because of their size. So black oil certainly is the universal seed. If you want to try to attract grosbeaks, they do tend to like a little higher elevation, but not always. There's some birds up on the lake plain, but they like platform feeders more so than the tube feeders. And of course, goldfinches, red poll siskins do like Niger in the Niger feeders or the Niger socks that are out there. There are finches near Rochester right now. There's some pine grosbeaks. Liz and I were talking before we jumped on here. There's some pine grosbeaks and some Bohemian waxwings been hanging out along near the Rochester Webster Park area. There's been a couple siskins, not a lot of siskins around this year. There's been a couple flocks of red polls. I do think red polls are going to increase over the coming months. They tend to come in as the snow comes in and kind of covers the weedy fields. They start to get pushed into the feeders more, and again, they'll eat black oil or Niger as well.
Mhm.
So, anyway, it's a pleasure to talk to everybody again. Thanks. Thanks for having me, Liz. I'd love to talk to you again in the future. And if there's any
Great.
last
Yeah, we'll touch base maybe when that iNaturalist aspect goes live, where people can submit their data to help the network and help the finch forecast. So for more information, everybody can find you. It looks like at finchnetwork.org. That's probably the best way to reach you if they have any finch questions or want to get some apparel for the winter, for holiday season. There's still time, I assume.
Yep,
So
absolutely. And check out the feeder cam in Maine. It's overrun with grosbeaks most days, and a couple other. There are some pine grosbeaks making appearances every so often, and gray jays or Canada jays too, which are
oh,
fun.
cool. Yes.
Yeah,
Okay, so those will come to feeders up there as well. Did they
yeah.
like
They come.
have feeders and stuff?
They like actually the old style suet, like the real suet, not the cakes.
Oh,
So
okay. Oh, good to know.
they're obviously a more northern bird, but if you get the old suet, like cut off the bone,
Hmm.
fat, they love it. And if you look at the feeder cam there, the one to the furthest to the right, often the gray jays. There's two gray jays that come in a couple times a day. They're not there for long, but you can kind of back up the history for at least 12 hours and look for it as well. Yeah, look at that. There's still grosbeaks there.
Okay, I see what you mean. The suet feeder here, it looks like it's got some
Yep.
fat in it. How
Yeah,
cool.
exactly. So anyway,
Awesome.
thanks again.
Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and we'll be back on Saturday with another broadcast. So until then, we'll talk to you later. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.